Hello, everyone. This is Unreasonable Founders, No Plan B. It's a conversation series featuring individuals who reject the conventional career path and insist on bending reality to address a problem they care about. In many cases, they walk away from safety, status, or comfort and keep going when most people would just quit or give up. My goal is to introduce you to at least one new founder each month. I think you'll find their personal and professional stories intriguing and their reasons for starting a company thought-provoking. And maybe this conversation will inspire you to start your own company and be a founder on your own. So this is the second episode in the series where I'm chatting with Philip, who's the founder and CEO of AppWizzy and FlatLogic. Welcome, Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Nice to be here.
I'm glad you're here. So let me just start off. We're going to talk a little bit about you first, and then we'll talk about AppWizzy towards the end. First question that I think people probably want to know who are watching this is, when someone asks you, what do you do? How do you answer that question today?
I run a software company which is called AppWizzy, which allows you to create full stack web applications by simply speaking with AI. So in other words, there is a kind of fancy word nowadays, which is vibe coding. And we call our platform like a professional vibe coding platform. So it means that you can build scalable, reliable websites and web apps that are going to serve you for many years. At least this is our plan, right? Because we provide a scalable infrastructure with a virtual machine that belongs to a user. So that's how I present ourselves.
Sounds good. So we're going to get more into the details and the distinction and differences between the vibe coding versions of it a little bit later. But for now, take me back to Belarus. What was the moment that you realized I can't build the life I want if I stay here?
It was 2020, actually. First time kind of I'm speaking about this kind of events in English, right? Because I was speaking about that in Belarusian, in my native kind of language. But uh, yeah, so in 2020 we had failed, I would say, revolution. Maybe not enough revolution, maybe kind of very huge protests and demonstrations in the country. And I took part in this protest. I was actively involved, both from the organization standpoint and being kind of active myself. And for that, I had to leave Belarus in 21st, from 20 maybe till 21st. There was this strong feeling that you cannot kind of stay there and build your life long term because you're going to be prosecuted. And until regime changes in Belarus, unfortunately, there is no future for something new, for technology, for business, for entrepreneurship. Unfortunately, I had to say that, right? And this is the trend that has a very strong negative kind of component to it, dynamic. And when you realize it, you understand that I have to accept this fact that my kind of life and the path of my life and path of my country temporarily, I hope, are different, and you decide to leave because you can be prosecuted. I was arrested, I was interrogated, they tried to recruit me, and all of this stuff. I had to report about that, and all of like crazy stuff that you imagine connected with dictatorship, government, like that. So you cannot do business there. And if you want to create, you better be in a calm environment where government works, where law works, where you have friends, where you can, build. So basically, in order to build, you have to have a foundation. And foundation is the law, of course, and the working society. That's maybe was a bit longer than I expected, right? But then you expected me to answer, but yeah, that's...
Well, I have some follow-up questions to that to get a little bit deeper into it. But if I remember correctly, you moved from Belarus to Lithuania and then to Poland. Did I have that right?
Right.
And if that's true, which it is, what triggered each move? So you talked a little bit about why you moved from Belarus out of Belarus, but why Lithuania and then why from Lithuania into Poland?
Because in Lithuania, I started a company called FlatLogic in 2013, so 12 years ago. And back then, we sold templates. So we sold a lot of mobile and web application templates. It's still there. This marketplaces like SimForest. So those are platforms where you could purchase this templates and various digital assets. So we sold similar kind of digital assets called templates. And for
Hmm.
example, one of our big clients also purchased the our template called SingApp Angular. It was Aptelos, the company you are very familiar with. So it turned to a very long-term partnership, right? So that was the main business. And in order to sell these templates, we had to use PayPal. And PayPal did not work in Belarus for businesses, maybe till, I don't know if it ever worked. So it did not work in 2013. So for that reason, I simply went to Vilnius, was really close to Minsk. It just was 2 hours drive. So you take a car or train and you drive there, and you are basically in European Union. So I went there, registered the company, and this is how my company was in Vilnius. So that's why the first kind of wave, and we had our company first in Vilnius in Lithuania. So that's why the first kind of migration, like obvious migration path, was to Lithuania. And then kind of my wife has Polish roots. So it's easier when you realize you cannot go back, you are kind of long term here, you need to build your life here. You start thinking more long term. Where can I get documents? Where can I have the solid foundation? And so Poland became our home. I really can call it home now because I feel very belonging here and kind of welcome here, because there are a lot of Belarusians kind of who migrated with political reasons. Also, a lot of Ukrainian refugees. So a lot of Belarusian Ukrainian community here who are kind of went either because of political persecution in Belarus or because of economic reasons or because of war in Ukraine. So very kind of thankful and happy to be here. So that's a short story. Yeah.
Okay. Following on to that question, this is sort of a two-part question, but I'm going to combine them together because you answered part of one of these questions already. So, what I'm curious about, and I think others would like to know as well, is how did your experience with the Belarusian and Russian politics shape your sense of responsibility as a founder? And then, related to that, and this is something that I've spoken to daily on as well about, being that he's from Romania, is there something about Eastern European grit or the culture that you think gives you an edge as a founder? And it might be related to your involvement and your experience with the political regimes and the governments that you lived in.
Mhm. It's actually very good questions. I believe we also touched this topic briefly with you, and I said you this thing that especially Eastern European post-Soviet bloc countries, they are, I would say they belong to the Western kind of world a lot, right? But and these people here, they were very educated, and but they were poor, you know.
Hmm.
So, for example, like lots of families, they are engineers. They have maybe I don't know some teachers, some basic. So they are very highly educated people, and but they do not have money because there was no sort of thing as money in Soviet Union, and we are the children of this generation, right? So first generation to really touch the capitalism world and try to build it for themselves for next generations, right? So because there is an opportunity for that, and I believe if it gives us any edge, yeah, I would say we're a bit hungry, like we need to eat more, we see what's possible. That's why it may be, it's like I don't know. As far as I recall, there was some research or study that shows that how successful are different generation of immigrants to the U.S. So maybe the first generation and maybe more successful than second or something like that. So I follow. I think that the same law works here. So the when you are in this capitalism Western world for the first time, it gives you a lot of motivation to try to build something. So that's the that's the edge that we have. My opinion, yeah.
I think it makes a lot of sense. So For me, the way I think about what you just said is there's been a pattern through the generations of your family and other families who've grown up in this, communist regime, and in particular in Russia. And they want to break that pattern for their future, their families, and what's beyond them generationally, right? And so it has to start somewhere. So, getting back a little bit to the activism in your time in Belarus. So, you've been, as you mentioned, openly critical of the regime in Belarus and in Russia. But what made you decide to speak out instead of keeping your head down? Like you talked about being a child of that generation and wanting things to be different and to open up opportunities for yourself. But there's also a lot of people your age or coming from your generation that didn't speak out, that took the safe path and just decided, this is where I live, this is where my family is. I'm just going to, be a part of this particular political regime, and I'm not going to say anything about it or fight it or leave. But what made you decide to speak out?
Yeah, also very good question. Like, makes you think very deep, like very deeply, right? Because there are different layers of answers to this question. Like, and if we go maybe to the deepest level, I would say it's something about family. Because my family comes from my grandfather, he was quite not noble but famous. He was he lead like a partisan brigade who fought in World War II. So he was a very kind of not noble but quite high status in Belarusian Soviet Republic. My father also served in kind of for Soviet Union, and it makes you have this opportunity. Also, kind of makes you have the attitude that to be sort of patriotic, not patriotic, but to have this values about your country, to think about your country. But in my time, the country was different. There was kind of a different country, and you are able to compare now. So I am estimating and evaluating my country not from the closed perspective of Soviet Union, how my grandfather did, for example, or my father, right? They were much older than me because I was quite a late child. And when you compare it, when you have access to information like Wikipedia, for example, you start to read a lot of history. How it made me have this active position is that majority of population in Belarus, they speak Russian, unfortunately, because of high kind of, again, population is highly urbanized. Lots of people live in cities. And in cities like Soviet, they call it intelligentsia. It means like the more higher status people who lived in cities, they spoke mostly Russian. And for that, and I start to question myself, why we Belarusians mostly speak Russian, right? And you start to, okay, you go deep, you do research, but then something like crazy that shifts your mind completely. If I am looking for Belarusian history and I'm reading and I'm consuming Belarusian history, I should do it only in Belarusian. I should not do it in Russian, right? Because it's our history. It's how we perceive ourselves. And when you accept this fact, everything changes for you. So I would say that for me, this kind of, my family gave me this mm, activism, being kind of open and public in the society and trying to speak openly about your demands and your point, being open to express it, being open to kind of not fight for it, but simply discuss it or debate it. And this fact that you need to kind of study Belarusian history in Belarusian, it made me choose the color or the side I belong to. And it's very kind of, it seems it's something about justice. It's very unjust what happens with my country. I simply wanted to, to prosper. I simply want, for example, you to be able to visit it freely, right? Someday. So it's about injustice. But I also accept the fact, like many Americans who I spoke with, and they say some of them say, I recall my grandfather came from some city in Poland or in Belarus. They do not say Belarus because they know it was Russian Empire back then. From Russian Empire. Maybe I am this kind of generation, maybe maybe my children will say the same. So that's how.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's, as you pointed out, sometimes it gets the generational changes get lost in time, right? For me personally, um, in my DNA, I have a little bit of Polish, I have a little bit of Scottish, I have a little bit of Irish, but this goes back a long, long way where people in their own form of activism, they left those countries to come to America for something better. And so it's not all that different. Today's environment in the United States, as you probably well know, very different. I don't want to compare it to the situation that you had in the Soviet Union, but there are businesses and founders of businesses today that are compromising in order to play it safe, to keep their business in a place where it can continue to grow and thrive. And they're not willing to voice their opinions openly for fear that the government will make some changes that will affect them and their business. So they're not willing to take that risk. And so I view that as a somewhat inauthentic perspective. And particularly, not to get too philosophical, but the point that you made, which is that, this foundation that most of us have anyways here in the United States was founded on that premise, right? Of risk and moving away from governments that we don't believe is supporting our best interests or that are not aligned with our own values. So I think that's important.
Yeah, I can add to that.
Yeah,
Okay.
please do.
I mean, like there are a lot of people in my country nowadays, for example, who still left or who travel and their mindset changes and what they say. For example, they love products of the Western world, but they want to keep it safe, and we kind of and they try to change their mind and convince themselves that maybe it's everywhere like that. And we recently had a debate with kind of a friend of mine about that. And I tell him, what you have here, you learn finance. He's like, not to mention kind of directly. So he works with finance, and I say, like finance is a product of Western world, product
Mm,
of democracy. It's you wouldn't there would be no, I don't know, finance in dictatorship where you will not be able to exchange
right.
stocks freely, right? So it's sort of hypocrisy, but to some extent, someone may take it, someone may not take it. So
Yeah, makes sense. All right. Last question in this particular area about you, and then we'll get into talk a little bit about Apwizi itself. So, for you personally, coming from an authoritarian environment, how does that influence the way you think about things like open source software platforms and who controls the stack? Because just intuitively, like open source is different than authoritarian control. And so how do you think about that? Because you're in the middle of developing software that is open source and is available on platforms. And you're essentially saying, and we'll get into this in detail because you said it a little bit earlier, the person developing this app, this software, they own the code. That's not authoritarian at all. Right. And so how does that,
it's an interesting
how do you think
observation.
that background that you had influences the way you think about that?
It's an interesting observation, and I never thought about this in this way. I think, well, so Flat Logic had a lot of open source projects in the past, right? So we may be different. We're kind of two different things, like open source that you put, for example, on GitHub projects, and open source, given the meaning that we give the source code, which may
Hmm.
not necessarily be publicly available, right? So
Hmm.
two different kinds of open sources, and I would say that. Yeah, it's the open source movement and the fact that someone, like, for example, I don't know, like a Linux kernel, for example, or other lots of open source products. Something that maybe I love the movement in large language models too. There are a lot of models becoming open source. For them, they use term open weight models, opposed to closed models like by OpenAI or by Google. I think that the whole idea of open source is very, again, democratic. It's very community driven. It's something against. It's not about authoritarian. It's about totalitarian. So totalitarian regime. It means that it controls all parts of person life, right? And it does not want you to, for example, share something with other people. And democratic here, and so And the open source is a very good example of kind of product available in democracy, right? Because people are freely able to just exchange. That's some common value, common good that you exchange and you contribute to, not because of something. That is, it's by the way, it's quite hard for regimes like in Belarus to understand that people are doing something not for the reason. They may be doing something because they just want to give away, give back. And it's again, you can give back when you have something. So
Got it. Makes sense. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit more about AppWizzy and the genesis of that. To start with, AppWizzy was born inside of a bootstrap service business called FlatLogic. At some point, you realized that this is an internal tool that should become its own product and company. And so what problem was AppWizzy solving for you personally within FlatLogic that you couldn't find in the market? And then what gave you the confidence at that point to spin it out and make it its own company?
okay, so first question, the kind of the utility in FlatLogic, right, of AppWizzy. So the
Mm-hmm.
value FlatLogic, again, just to recall the story again, right, briefly. So we started with templates. We started selling this static web and mobile application templates. So you came to our website, or before it was third-party marketplaces, and purchase a template. And this template would have a lot of different components, like ready to use, I don't know, charts, calendars, dashboards, widgets, forms, tables, different components, and just recombine these components to build your final app. But it still
Mm-hmm.
required a lot of coding. We basically sold the license to the source code. And on top of that, we also rendered professional services. So we were delivering tailored solutions for businesses based on this templates. And this work was quite repetitive. So all clients, all startups we worked with, all businesses, they demand quite similar things, all of them. And that's why we kind of tried to extract and generalize this core problem and build a product that back then, it was 2023, allowed you to just generate the application based on front end, back end, and database. Sorry, generate front end, back end, and database based on the schema, so-called schema of the application. And the schema, I can talk. It's like a bit technical thing,
No,
right?
go ahead. Yeah.
So I have a software engineering education, so it's my it's my professional background education, right? And every software engineer knows that software engineering, it's not about writing code, it's about a software development lifecycle. So how you design software, how you collect requirements, how you prototype it, how you design it. Then one of these parts, it's only one of these parts, you write code. Then you do testing, then you do a delivery, then you do maintenance, and so on. So that's
Mm-hmm.
the kind of the life cycle. And the first part of this life cycle is the design. And design, it means not only you design the interface, it also means you design the architecture, which includes the relations between sort of entities, so-called entities in the application. And so based on this input of entities, we had a generator before large language models were so available that generated this front-end, back-end, and database applications. So it solved our immediate need. We were able to deliver much faster. And of course, not only deliver much faster, but also were able to demo and sell faster, because we were able to impress our clients more by showcasing them, hey, just in the demo, this is like potentially your app is going to have this database schema. I'm going to input it, and this is like your app available in 5 minutes. And it had this wow effect before vibe coding was the thing. So yeah, so that's, I believe, this first part of question. And the second part was
More just what gave you the confidence? What was that
yeah.
point at which you decided this could be a company? This could be something we could launch separate and apart from FlatLogic?
I would say that I never treated FlatLogic as a standard software development agency or studio. And I always treat it as a product company or a startup company. So it was very natural to simply offer our product. Maybe it may sound not very kind of startup-y, or I don't know how to call that, right? But the goal was for me not to make a lot of money with the company, with the software development company, but to build a great product and bring value to the users. So I still dream a lot about building something that users love to use and naturally spread the word about. So that's kind of my goal. And I saw an opportunity and decided to make a bet on this.
It's so un-American, but I love that answer. I meet lots of software founders, people who are trying to start a company or who have started a company, and it's about the money. It's about what they see in social media, and they see people making a lot of money and getting rich and living an amazing, what they think is an amazing lifestyle. And that's what it becomes about. And they lose track of the real reason why you do that. And so, for you, I know that because you mentioned this, that there might have been, I'm curious to know if there is or was, a specific moment or experience where it was a particular customer or a frustration or just something that you saw in the market where you said, I have to build AppWizzy, but it has to be a separate company and I have to make this more available to others outside of those that just use the services of FlatLogic.
Maybe I wouldn't be able to kind of recall this exact moment. It was very natural. It was very smooth and inside of the process. And this idea, it was because before that, we did something very agile. We had a template called React Native template. So React Native, it's a technology to build mobile apps. And we have React Native template. So if you purchase this template, you would be able to build like a mobile app much faster. And back then, maybe it was 5 years ago, so it was in 2020 or even earlier. We just released a product, but there was no product. We just tested it. It was just a hypothesis. We even had a product hunt launch, which was quite successful, but it was only like a form collecting emails. So the product was the product was similar idea. So you just pick some parameters and it builds you an app. And this idea, I believe, it's in software world. It's very common. It's a dream of any software engineer, but maybe it was not that UX friendly as it is now when large language models became kind of available everywhere. Because before you had to either drag and drop apps or go via some wizard, but now you can simply speak with the AI. So I would say that's a very natural, idea that was uh, in the minds of a lot of engineers.
Okay. You and I have talked about this subject a lot, but I want to talk about it just a little bit more. So we're getting towards the end of 2025, and this has been a year of vibe coding. Many companies were founded. Many companies like Lovable in particular, to mention them, have just grown tremendously, exponentially as people really got excited about this idea that I can use natural language to create software products or solutions. As the year has gone by, many people have figured out the limitations of those vibe coding tools and what they really were meant for. And I think early on in the year in particular, it wasn't that it was oversold, at least not in my opinion. It's that people formed this interpretation of what vibe coding could do, and that created this enormous hype. That hype wore off and has continued to wear off a bit as the years gone by, not because it isn't exciting, because it isn't transformational, because it isn't new, but because people are finally really sort of coming back to earth, so to speak, on what it really is capable of doing. And in many ways, it's fortunate, but it's also unfortunate. It's fortunate because it raised awareness for people about what the capabilities and the possibilities are of vibe coding tools. But it's also unfortunate in the sense that it created such a huge hype that people got very excited about it. And then when they realized it wasn't capable of doing what they thought or had heard that it was capable of doing, then they got disinterested, which, is not necessarily a good thing. But we know that AppWizzy, what you built with AppWizzy, is different than the core vibe coding tools like Lovable, but different. You're still continuing to use that term vibe coding, just attaching the word professional to it
Right.
to create the distinction. But how is AppWizzy different than some of these other core vibe coding tools that were launched earlier this year? Using Lovable maybe is the best example.
So maybe I also provide my kind of opinion about the context. As you said, like the Lovable and all these tools, they are, I believe, the promise and what people were attracted to is that you can build software by just speaking with AI and it will be complete working software, which of course failed because you cannot build a fully functional kind of um, I don't know, house. The construction analogy to software development is quite often used, so it's applicable here as well, right? So you cannot build a fully, I don't know, fully working house with infrastructure, with lights, I don't know, with coverage and all of this with roof by yourself. You need a lot of different resources and size to do that, or at least experience. If you are alone, maybe you have a lot of experience to do that, right? And so it is here. So the same logic is here, and I believe people were attracted to this idea, and it has sort of same motivation that casinos maybe or iGaming industry have. So it's simply kind of get rich quick. I even had a video about that. So the promise is get rich quick, and it will give you, I don't know, SaaS startup, and you will make 1 million ARR next month. So that was the promise. Unfortunately, it failed maybe for 99 and 0.999 so on percent of people, right? But those who made the promise made money on that. And how is AppWizzy different? It's different in its foundation and nature because it comes from us, and we as a firm with software development experience know how to deliver products. And what it really means is that I mentioned it briefly. So first of all, you get the separate standalone virtual machine, which means that you're in full control and fully own your environment. You do not depend on third-party tools like Supabase or Firebase or any other services that host your data. It's also a thing about modern web development. So um, maybe because I have like certain years of experience here, maybe that's why I call it like that. But maybe for new people who come, it's a normal that when you develop a software, you host your data in one provider, you use authentication services in another provider. But for me, those are the core logic of your own business, which you need to own, right? And if you need to build it, you need to own it. So that's the point number one. So you have the virtual machine and you fully control it, and you can extend it, you can enlarge it, you can increase the capacity if you need. And the second is we will have a lot of different templates. Right now we have just a few, but we will keep making a bet on the templates. So it's sort of a horizontal platform with vertical kind of niches, vertical templates. Template for a CRM application, template for ERP application, but these templates are half complete or maybe 90% complete. And you just use AI to tailor it slightly to your final requirements, but you get the working code. So that's the idea. For example, I'm thinking about adding a WordPress template. PHP powers 80% of the internet, and WordPress is a very popular blogging platform. Probably the most popular blogging platform. Why not attach it to your AI and provide as a template so you can host a reliable blog machine powered by AI on your own machine? So that's how I would fix blog for myself, and that's how I would do blog for AppWizzy. So that's the idea.
Got it. All right. In the same vein, but slightly different, when you and I talked the other day, I mentioned to you that I went to a go-to-market executives dinner. And during that dinner, there was a very lively discussion about jobs. and the relationship of AI. And I know this is a bit of a provocative subject for some people. I happen to believe that some people who I don't believe are creative thinkers are predicting the future. Other people like yourself and what I hope to be are people who are trying to invent the future. We see the trends, but we're not willing to accept that it has to be a certain way, that it has to end up in a certain place, that we are at that stage still where we can influence the outcome. It's not predetermined. So there's a lot of talk about AI taking jobs. Like I said, I don't believe in predicting that. I believe that we can, people like you and me who are even have a small part in it, can help influence the outcome of that. In particular, do you think vibe coding, or more specifically, professional vibe coding, will take jobs? And will it remove the need for humans to do that software development?
Um, I would say that it already takes jobs, but maybe not in a bad way. Like it takes jobs in a good way, because in general, I believe that AI simply enables creativity. So it's another tool for you to be more creative and be more save your time so you can like play. Now programming is just a play. I for example, I when I program app Wheezy, I tell AI what to do, right? And I just observe, I manipulate, I sorry, I watch it code, I make modifications, I control it. So it's more creative, less stressful process. I don't know, maybe I'm optimistic here. So in my opinion, it will even have more jobs, because what is a job? Job is you helping someone to so you bring value to another person, right? So from economic standpoint. And so in this equation there is a person, it always a value to person, so we will not go anywhere, right? People are not planning to go extinct. So this demand for value
Mhm.
will still be there. Demand changes, right? Maybe we will demand less software, maybe we will demand less, I don't know, games, I don't know, maybe
Mhm.
fun, maybe entertainment, maybe some tools,
Mhm.
times with our family, something like that, right? So it will be there, but just the value will be created faster, and maybe parts of this value will be created by AI. Just a shift, I would say that.
The best analogy that I heard recently was that of a carpenter, somebody that builds a house. Going back many years, in order to build that house, you had to hammer nails into wood to put the house frame together. And it's mundane. It's not particularly challenging. It doesn't particularly require a skill, but it's something that has to be done in order to build the house. Somebody eventually invented the nail gun, and it improved the efficiency of that person putting nails in wood by 10x or more. Now, does that mean that it eliminated that job of the carpenter? No. What it did is it made it so that that carpenter could spend more time thinking about how to create a beautiful, well-built home, the work that they love to do anyways. It really put them back into the mode of doing the work that they love to do in the first place when they became a carpenter, because this foundation building, the putting nails into wood, is something that's required, but they don't love to do it. But then they feel like this machine takes their job away. But in fact, what it really does is it makes their job more fun, more interesting, more engaging.
Right.
And they get back to loving their job again because they're an artist and because now they're creating this beautiful structure and not just putting nails into wood. And so, similar analogy, I think, to software development, which is there are those aspects of software development, which is the mundane aspects of putting software coding together, that AI can remove some of that from you and really put you back into the mode of being the creator.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. It's a very good
I,
analogy.
yeah, I love that analogy. All right. Down to the last couple questions. For you personally, what would count as success for you in, say, 5 to 10 years for AppWizzy that has nothing to do with the valuation of your company or the annual recurring revenue?
Of course, people using it and spreading the word naturally. Like You have this three types of marketing, right? When you first is paid ads, it's the cheapest and not cheapest, most expensive, right? Type of marketing where you simply purchase traffic. Second is where you sort of referrals, where you provoke them to, where you kind of initiate your customers to somehow refer your platform, right? And third is word of mouth, right? So this is the effect that I would love to achieve and make people speak about it naturally because they truly want to speak about it. Maybe we will have to introduce more open source stuff for that so people feel like it's something that is also theirs. So
Hmm.
they have a kind of a part in it. So that's the ultimate kind of vision for me. So millions of people are happy using AppWeezy.
All right. I have one last question, and then I'm going to wrap it up at the end by just asking you if there's anything else you want to add that I didn't ask. Last question is, if you were talking to a young software developer in Belarus today who wants out of the country and wants to be successful, what's the bluntest advice you could give them today?
It's a very good question. I need like maybe a few seconds to think about it. Like, so they are living in Belarus and they are software. They're in software. I would say them learn math, learn something AI because math is the least common denominator. Not the least common denominator, the opposite, right? So it's the deepest denominator that you have between all things, and it's sort of constant in the environment that changes super fast. With AI, everything changes super fast. So
No.
you know how to adapt to changes, and maybe math describes it. Maybe math kind of teaches you about different relations in the world. So that's my advice. And just experiment. Like it's something like Steve Jobs said, which is this quote that. Someday, not too long from now, you will be old and be cleared away, right? So what's the point of not being yourself? Would you? And also another one is I hear it's by Jeff Bezos, or it's like Jeff Bezos methodology, or maybe I'm wrong here. What I'm talking about is the regret minimization principle, future regret minimization principle. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
So you have to live in the way that your future regrets are minimized. So you know that in the future, I will not regret about the decisions taken now.
Hmm. Or the actions not taken. All right. Got it. So this has been perfect. It's exactly what I wanted to talk about. As you know, I'm attracted to founders like yourself who are intellectually curious and intellectually humble. You haven't let us down in either one of those today. So
Thank you.
I think people will learn a lot from listening to you speak about your personal experience, but also why you created AppWizzy and the challenges that you went through to create that company as well. Is there anything I didn't ask you or anything you want to say that we didn't talk about?
Thank you for inviting me. I believe it's very important to have friends along your journey and those who support you, and those people like you who you can learn from, Kevin. So it's very important to. So you are also here and in our journey. So thanks for that. And yeah, I believe that's it. I have nothing to add. I also enjoyed it.
Sounds good. Thank you for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.